I started off this playthrough like you would start off every Fallout playthrough. I made my character. This is Alvin. And Alvin survived a nuclear bomb. His wife Nora, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. Alvin's son got kidnapped, and Alvin must find him at all costs. One thing about Alvin, though, is that he doesn't know how to use a gun. Welcome to Fallout 4 Melee only. So after I escaped the pod that I was trapped in, I then had to escape Vault 111. On my way to the exit, I picked up a security baton and had to fight my way through a bunch of rad roaches. After reaching the door to the vault, I found a dead body, and on that body was a Pip-Boy. After committing a little bit of grave robbery, I stole said Pip-Boy and opened the vault. After hopping onto the nearest elevator to the surface, I saw the sun for the first time and had the same reaction as the average Discord moderator. I then went to my old house to see if I could find my helper bot Codsworth, and like usual, he was there. He then asked me to go check the neighborhood with him to see if we could find Sean, my son. After checking a lot of the houses and there not being any Sean anywhere, Codsworth told me to go check Concord to see if the people there could help me. On my way to Concord, I passed the Red Rocket gas station, and there was a dog there named Dogmeat, and he would be my companion until the end of the journey. After reaching Concord with my new companion, I came across a group called the Minutemen being attacked by raiders. I then helped Preston Garvey by killing a bunch of the raiders, only after dying again and again and again and again. I literally spent 30 minutes at this spot. After talking to the leader of the Minutemen, Preston Garvey, he tasked me with getting a pair of T-60 power armor that was on the roof. In order to get it, I had to get a fusion core that was in the basement. And I went and got the fusion core, and now you might be thinking, oh, I went and got the power armor. No, I left and came back to help them later. Then me and my good old pal Dogmeat started on our way to the great green jewel of the Commonwealth, Diamond City. On my way to Diamond City, I came across this place called Drumlin Diner, and here there was a chem dealer named Wolfgang that was trying to force this nice old lady into giving him all of her caps. Of course, being the hero I am, I hid in a corner and waited for Trudy to do all the work for me. And then me and Dogmeat sat on our journey to Diamond City once again. When arriving at the gate, we saw a woman by the name of Piper, arguing with a man over the intercom demanding to be let in. She then turned to us and asked if we could lie to the man saying we were a shopkeeper. Really wanting to be let in, I agreed and lied to the man. And it worked and the gate was open. Then I was greeted by Mr. Mayor McDonough, and then literally listened to McDonough and Piper argue for like 15 minutes straight. Afterwards, Piper told me to meet her later for an interview, and I did so. After the interview, everyone in Diamond City knew I was a vault dweller. Then I went to the Colonial Cap House to start a mission called Diamond City Blues. When I entered the cap house, I saw a man by the name of Paul talking to his wife trying to get her to come home. Paul then gets his butt whooped by the owner of the cap house, Crook, and then leaves. I then left behind him. He then came to me outside and offered caps for me to go back into the cap house and forcefully tell Crook to leave his wife alone. I agreed because caps are caps, and then me and Paul stormed into the cap house to hopefully get Crook to leave him alone. After a little bit of an altercation, Crook was decapitated. And then after committing a little bit more grave robbery, I found a note on him about a chem deal that was happening not far from Diamond City. And of course, knowing me, I was going to attend that. I then arrived at the location of the chem deal, only to die again and again and again and again, until my chat told me, you're being stupid, go get some power armor. So then I went and did just that. I went up to a scrapyard and used a holotape I found and caused a robot to self-destruct. I then took the 2 power cores out of that, went just down the street and took a pair of T-60 power armor that was right off the side of a vertibird. Then I went back and slaughtered everyone at the chems deal and stole all the chems. I would use these chems to supply me until the end of the run. I then went back to Diamond City to stock up on supplies for the upcoming Deathclaw fight. And if you've never played Fallout 4 before, you might be thinking, oh, why is there a Deathclaw? Well, immediately after helping Preston Garvey, a Deathclaw spawns and you have to slay it. And I didn't want to just go in, axe ablazing and die instantly. So I went and bought a bunch of stems and resources that I would need for the upcoming fight. And then I went right back to the Museum of Freedom where Preston and the Minutemen were to go and kill this Deathclaw. And thanks to the trusty pair of power armor I had and all the resources I'd bought back in Diamond City, I killed it first try. And with taking minimal damage. I then went back into the museum to ask Preston what he was going to do now. He said that he was going to go back to Sanctuary to where Codsworth was and where I lived previously before the war. I wished him luck, then back to Diamond City it was. But before going to Diamond City, I made a quick pit stop at Huber's Comics. I went to Huber's Comics to get Grognak's Axe and Leotard, which both grant melee damage when equipped. I then went to the Valentine Detective Agency in Diamond City, because I'd caught wind of a detective named Nick Valentine that could help me find my son. After entering the detective agency, all I saw was a woman by the name of Ellie Perkins, and she told me about how Nick had went missing while on a case. She told me he left to go to Vault 114, a vault that was inside of a train station, and he hadn't returned. I then offered to go help find Nick, and off to Vault 114 I was. Upon arriving to the train station it was located, I saw nothing but a bunch of triggermen, and after unaliving a lot of the triggermen, I was into Vault 114, where I was met by, guess what? more triggermen. And after fighting my way through what felt like hundreds of triggermen, I made it to an area where there was a man by the name of D.W.O talking to Nick Valentine. Nick had been locked into the overseer's office and had been there for days. I swiftly unalived D.W.O and was led into the room with Nick Valentine. I then told Nick about my son and he agreed to help, but first we had to get out of the vault. And after fighting through a whole lot more triggermen, we were met by Skinny Malone and his girlfriend Darla. And after using my amazing charisma, me and Nick swiftly left the vault and the train station. We then went back to Diamond City, where Nick interviewed me about details for what happened to Sean. And after telling him about the bald scarred man, he told me about a man named Kellogg that lived in Diamond City not too long ago. And this man named Kellogg had a child with him that was about 10 years old. And I instantly knew that that was Sean. Then me and Nick traveled to where Kellogg used to live in Diamond City to see if we could find any clues about his and my son's whereabouts. After reaching the door to Kellogg's house, it was locked and neither me or Nick could get in. So I had to go to Mr. Mayor McDonough to see if he could give me a key. And again, after using my charisma, I had a key. Me and Nick went into Kellogg's house where I found a big red button hiding under a desk. Once the button was clicked, it led us into a secret room where there was a chair and a bunch of cigars. Then I was given the idea to give the cigars to Dogmeat to see if he could track the scent. I then followed Dogmeat across half the Commonwealth. I got jumped by a few creatures, died to a Yao guy multiple times. Dogmeat led me to a building called Fort Hagen. Upon entering the building through the roof, there was a bunch of robots, or Institute synths. After fighting through a bunch of them, and dying a lot, I made it to Kellogg and he was a lot easier than any of the synths were in the entire building. I killed him first try, then died immediately after to the synths that were beside him. After they were all dead, I searched Kellogg's body and found a bunch of synth parts that were connected to his brain, and I took a little bit of his brain too, but that'll come in handy later. Before I killed Kellogg, he told me that my son was in a place called the Institute, and that he was safe there. But knowing me, I was going to get my son at all costs, and that means I'd have to find a way into the Institute. But first I get introduced to the Brotherhood of Steel, and see what my reaction was when I was streaming.
Oh my gosh!
We are the Brotherhood of Steel.
Oh! It's the Brotherhood!
I then traveled to Cambridge Police Station to see if I could join the Brotherhood of Steel. There I saw a man by the name of Paladin Danz being attacked by a bunch of feral ghouls. And after hiding and waiting for him to kill every single one of the ghouls, I told him that I was looking to join the Brotherhood of Steel. And then Paladin Danz told me that they were trying to send a distress signal to the Pridwin, but the signal was too weak to reach the airship, and that they needed a deep-range transmitter from ArcJet Systems. I offered to help him in hopes that I could join the Brotherhood of Steel. Paladin Danz said yes, and then I followed him to ArcJet Systems. Upon entering ArcJet Systems, we saw a bunch of dead Protectrons, which meant that someone or something had been there. As we ventured further into the building, we discovered Institute synths. The Institute was also trying to get this deep-range transmitter. We then traveled into the basement where the jet was, and being the hero I am, I turned on the jet to save Paladin Danz from all the synths that were attacking him. Me and Paladin Danz then discovered that the deep-range transmitter had been stolen by the synths already, and we had to search a bunch of the synths' dead bodies to find which one had the transmitter. After finding the transmitter, me and Paladin Danz left the building, and he stopped me right before we started heading back to the Cambridge police station and asked if I wanted to join the Brotherhood of Steel. And of course, I said yes. Then me and Paladin Danz went back to the Cambridge police station and hopped on a vertibird and flew over to the Pridwin, the home base of the Brotherhood of Steel. After landing on the Pridwin, I got out of the vertibird and talked to Lancer Captain Kells. Kells gave me the rundown of all the rules of being an initiate for the Brotherhood of Steel, and then I had to go meet the big dog, Elder Maxon. And after listening to Elder Maxon give a speech to a bunch of the other initiates, I finally got to talk to him. Maxon told me that he believes that I would be an asset to the Brotherhood and instantly promoted me to Knight. And it was here that I would get my own pair of Brotherhood of Steel power armor that I would use until the end of the run. I then went and met all the different members of the Brotherhood of Steel, but I'm not going to put that in this video because it was kind of boring. One thing I did was I used a glitch and teleported into the cage where this one shopkeeper was, and I stole a fusion core and XO1 power armor, so I guess that was cool. I then went back to the Valentine Detective Agency and told Nick about my findings with Kellogg. I told him about how my son was in the Institute, and then we got the idea to go to a place in Good Neighbor called the Memory Den and find a woman called Dr. Amari and give her the little bit of a brain that I found off of Kellogg and go back in time into Kellogg's memory. So off to Good Neighbor I went. After arriving to Good Neighbor, the first thing I saw was the leader of Good Neighbor, Hancock, stab someone in the chest. And then he turned to me and basically just said, "Good luck and Good Neighbor." So yeah, I guess that happened. But immediately after that, I went straight to the Memory Den. And I found Dr. Amari and asked her if she could help me. She agreed after a little bit of convincing, and I gave her the piece of Kellogg's brain that I had. She then sat Nick down in a chair and started trying to go into his brain. But the link wasn't strong enough to access Kellogg's brain, so I had to get into. So I sat down in the memory lounge and experienced Kellogg's memories. Now I did kind of speed through this part when I was streaming the game, so I don't really have much to say about it, but pretty much Kellogg had a rough life life, and then he found a job working for the Institute. But he did have Sean at one point until a courser teleported Sean back to the Institute. And that left me with having to try to find a way into the Institute, like I said earlier. But that's where a man by the name of Dr. Brian Virgil comes in hand. A lost Institute scientist that's hiding away in the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is pretty much a radiation-filled wasteland, and I was going to have to travel through it. So I did just that and traveled through the Dead Sea. While traveling through the Dead Sea, I found a group of people called the Children of Atom. They seemed to be some kind of cult that worshipped the atomic bomb, but I honestly could have cared less what they were doing, so I just asked them where Virgil was. And they told me he was in a cave not far from there. And upon entering said cave, it was then that I told Virgil that I knew who he was, and that he was a part of the Institute and he escaped. He asked me how I knew that, and I told him it was because I killed Kellogg and went into his brain. I then asked him to help me get into the Institute so I could find my son. And I'm guessing since he felt bad because I lost my son, he decided to help me. He told me that the only way to get into the Institute is via teleportation, but he did not know how to build the teleporter to get into the Institute. So in order to do that, I had to kill a courser, and steal the courser chip to build a blueprint for a Signal Interceptor. But first I have to kill a courser. So I did just that, and I traveled to a place called Green Tech Genetics, where upon entry I saw a bunch of dead gunners, and a man over the intercom saying that there was a courser on the top floor. And after pushing through hundreds of gunners and killing all of them, I reached the top floor to where the courser was holding 3 people hostage. And thanks to the chems that I found earlier in the power armor I had, I killed the courser first try with no problem. But then I needed a way to decode the courser chip. And in order to do that, I had to find a group of people called the Railroad. And all I had to find them is something Dr. Amari told me. Follow the Freedom Trail. As cryptic as that is, I knew exactly what that meant. In Lexington, there's a big red trail. The trail is called the Freedom Trail, and it's a line that travels to all the major places from the Revolutionary War. It just so happens the final building that line connects to is the Old North Church. And that is where the Railroad is. The Railroad is a group of people that work to free the synths from the Institute, and they have to be very secretive about their plans and what they're doing so the Institute doesn't kill all of them. But I used my big brain and found them. And after following the Freedom Trail and entering the Old North Church, I made my way down into the basement. And after typing in railroad with this wheel, a door opened up and I was met with the leader of the railroad, Desdemona. Then Desdemona started asking a whole bunch of questions like, how'd you get here? How do you know about us? Until another member of the railroad, Deacon, told her that I killed Courser. And her realizing that I could be an asset to her, she allowed me to go into the railroad's headquarters. I then went to a man by the name of Tinker Tom and gave him the chip. I then took the code from the decoded chip and gave it to Virgil. Virgil then told me the blueprints to build the Signal Interceptor. Now I am siding with the Brotherhood of Steel for this run, and in order to get that ending, I have to do one mission that I've been dreading since the beginning of the playthrough. And for that mission, I have to kill a behemoth. So Elder Maxon tasked me with securing Fort Strong. The only problem is it's protected by a bunch of super mutants, and like I said before, a behemoth. So I arrived at the location where the behemoth was and started trying to kill it. But as you might expect, I died. But then I just used VATS like crazy and killed the behemoth with no problem. To be honest, a lot of stuff with this run was a whole lot easier than I was expecting. I then entered Fort Strong and killed all the super mutants in there, only after dying a few times again. And then I got lost for like 30 minutes before someone in my chat told me where to go. And then I secured the Fort Strong armory. I then went back and reported to Elder Maxon, telling him that the mission was a success, and then I told him that I was siding with him and was hoping to build the Signal Interceptor with him. He then told me thank you for choosing the Brotherhood of Steel to build it, and told me to bring the blueprints to Proctor Ingram. And so I did that and placed the first part for the teleporter. I then went back to Proctor Ingram and she told me a list of things that I would need and where to get them. Luckily I already had a few of the things I need, so I built 2 of the parts for the teleporter. But I was missing one component, and that was a biometric scanner. So I traveled to the Medford Memorial Hospital. And I just want to say this place is a freaking maze. First I had to fight through a bunch of super mutants. Then I spent 30 minutes walking around trying to figure out where a shelf was so I could find the biometric scanner. And I really love Fallout games, but I hate how big and how confusing a lot of their buildings are. But anyway, I got the biometric scanner and placed the final part for the teleporter. But after building a few generators, the teleporter was good to go. But then I talked to Elder Maxon and Proctor Ingram about completing the Signal Interceptor. And then after Elder Maxon giving me a mission that I never completed, I was on the platform, and then Proctor Ingram gave me a mission where I had to put a network scanner inside of the Institute's computer. I then told Proctor Ingram to fire it up and send me to the Institute. But after using the Signal Interceptor and getting teleported into the Institute, I ran over and popped the holotape into a computer and scanned the entire Institute network. Then I went up this elevator and saw how cool the Institute looked. I ran into a room and saw what looked like my son playing with toys. And then after freaking out for a bit, this grown man walked into the room and I killed him and ran out of the Institute and left. And I know you're probably wondering, why'd you leave without talking to the father or finding Sean? Well, this was like my 25th playthrough of this game and I've done everything already. So I kind of just ran in there and killed father, then just left knowing that I'd come back later. But anyway, I went to this signal relay and teleported myself back onto the Pridwin, where I met Elder Maxon and told him about my mission. And he was mad because I never completed his mission, and then the Institute was mad at everyone. But luckily I still had some some valuable information from the network scan that I did, so he wasn't that mad at me. He then told me to go give the holotape with the network scan to Proctor Ingram, so I did so. Then Proctor Ingram said that it would take a while to decode the network scanner, and then she showed me what the Brotherhood of Steel had been working on for over 11 years, and that was rebuilding a big robot they had, Liberty Prime. Then Proctor Ingram told me that they needed a specific scientist to rebuild Liberty Prime. She told me she was last seen in Diamond City, so that's where I was headed. After arriving to her lab in Diamond City, the only thing I saw was her assistant named Duff. Duff told me that the scientist Skara had went on a research trip and hadn't returned yet, so I traveled to where she was to find her. She was located at General Atomics Galeria? I don't friggin' know. I then found her in the back of one of the buildings doing research, even though it looked to me like she was just standing there looking to a wall, but I'm not sure what was going on. I then spent 15 minutes trying to talk her into going back with the Brotherhood of Steel, and eventually she gave in. I then went back to Proctor Ingram and she told me that Liberty Prime's legs couldn't be connected because they needed electromagnetic actuators or something like that, I'm not sure. But pretty much I'd have to build these actuators and I needed high-powered magnets for that. Now in this part in the video I went back to the Medford Memorial Hospital, but I'm not going to show that in this video because it's really boring. I basically just ran around for another 15 minutes trying to figure out where I needed to go. But then I came back to the airport, built the actuators, and then talked to Proctor Ingram. And she then told me that Liberty Prime was missing one of his major components, his weapons. So then I traveled back into the Dead Sea and to specifically the Sentinel compound site, where I pretty much just killed a bunch of ghouls and traveled through a bunch of tunnels until I ran into a room with another Child of Adam cult member, and then I lied to him saying that I was going to spread Adam. And by that I meant I was just going to steal the nukes and have Liberty Prime throw them at people. But now that Liberty Prime has his nukes and his legs, it was time to activate him. And the first thing he started talking about was how bad communism was. And then randomly Elder Maxon needed me. And he then would go on to tell me that Paladin Dan's was a synth, and that he had ran away and hid. And so I went and found Paladin Dan's and, unalived him. I then went and reported my success to Elder Maxon. And I guess Elder Maxon really liked me because he upgraded me to Paladin. Paladin D.W.O? It's not got a bad ring to it. I then went and talked to Lancer Captain Kells, and it was here where I was tasked with killing the railroad. And so me and the Brotherhood of Steel rolled up to the Old Point Church and just started massacring everyone. Except for the robot Pam. My YouTube chat really didn't want me to kill her, so I put a holotape into a computer and like wiped her memory or something. I then went back to Captain Kells and reported my success. I then went and talked to Proctor Ingram, and she told me that Liberty Prime wasn't getting enough power, so we had to go get a beryllium reactor. Then me and Proctor Ingram hopped onto a vertibird to mass fusion. And after me and Proctor Ingram landed on top of the mass fusion building, we had to fight our way through a bunch of synths. I then collected a key card to start the elevator, and the entire elevator ride I hid behind Proctor Ingram because we were getting shot at and I didn't have any cover or any way to shoot back. The elevator's power then got shut off, and then again I hid in a corner and waited for Proctor Ingram to do all the work. Look, I was not about to fight all those synths with nothing but an axe. Then I went and got the power back on for the elevator, and down we went. Once reaching the bottom, we were met by more synths, and I closed a messed up elevator door and hid until Proctor Ingram killed all the synths. We then made it down to the level where the beryllium reactor was stored, and being the dashing hero that I am, I had to go into a radiation-filled zone and take the beryllium reactor and then hide in a corner and wait for Proctor Ingram to kill a sentry. But then Proctor Ingram got knocked out and I had to kill the sentry by hand. Luckily I killed the sentry, but then immediately after that 2 Assaultrons came out, and I had to kill them as well. Now with the reactor in hand, I went back to the Boston airport, and then Proctor Ingram said I could do the honors, and I popped the reactor right into the back of Liberty Prime. And then it was go time.
I went and pressed the big red button and powered up Liberty Prime. And after he broke through the railing, we were on the way to the Institute. I then followed him for 15 minutes across the entire Commonwealth, until he got stuck in a bridge and I had to reload my save and then follow him again. Then after reaching the CIT where the Institute was located, me and the Brotherhood of Steel had to fight a bunch of synths, while Liberty Prime scanned the surroundings to figure out where to enter the Institute. And after he turned into Cyclops and blew a hole into the ground, we were in. I then spoke to Elder Max and he told me that our next target was the reactor, and to kill everything I saw, whether it was man or machine. And after fighting our way through hundreds of synths, we made it into the biolab. And after fighting my way through robot gorillas, synths, and the scientists inside the lab, we made it into the main hub. Here, I hid and let the Brotherhood of Steel do all the work, mostly Elder Maxon. After hiding for what felt like forever, Proctor Ingram went on the intercom and said that the reactor was available through the Advanced Systems Division, but we couldn't get in the room because there was a lockdown going on. I then went into the father's room and accessed his terminal. Here, I disabled the lockdown. Here, I fought my way through a few more synths, then made my way to the Advanced Systems Division. Then after going through this hallway with a bunch of turrets that almost killed me, I was in the reactor room. And guess what I did here. Either I A, went in axe blazing and killed all of them by myself, or B, hid in a corner and let Elder Maxon kill all of them for me. Well, if you guessed the latter of the two options, you'd be right. After all the synths were killed, I made my way to the reactor. Here, I opened the door and set the detonator on the reactor. Then Proctor Ingram teleported me and Elder Maxon back to the signal relay. And after getting teleported to the relay, my son, Sean, was standing there beside Proctor Ingram and demanded that I took him home. Or more like begged that I took him home. I then obliged and said he could come home with me. And then I told Proctor Ingram that it was time to go home. She then teleported me and Elder Maxon onto the mass fusion building. Here, I set off the detonator and blew up the Institute, whilst also completing the challenge. And I just want to say this whole video, this whole playthrough was extremely fun for me to make, and I would like to make a whole lot more videos like this. And I just want to say thank you to all the people who came and watched the stream while I was playing through the game. And if you haven't already, like and subscribe. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of this month, so it would be greatly, greatly appreciated. But yeah, that was Fallout 4, Melee only.